Okay, strap in. This is going to be a big one. My favourite book of 2021 was Tell Me I'm Worthless by Alison Rumfitt. This is a queer, gothic horror novel, a twist on the haunted house, and something that explores transgender life in the UK right now. And now, so far at least, this is my favourite book of 2022. A queer, gothic, pseudo-horror novel exploring the love and loss of a lesbian relationship. Gothic fiction is my favourite. It is my favourite genre by a country mile. And most Gothic fiction is queer in some way. Even if it's not explicitly queer, it doesn't have any queer characters, it's often queer-coded. You can read a lot of classic Gothic fiction as queer. Dracula and Frankenstein are two of my favourite novels, and they're both very queer-coded. And a lot of modern Gothic fiction is explicitly queer, and that's what I love about it. Our Wives Under the Sea is written by Julia Armfield. This is her debut novel, although she really rocked the literary world with her short story collection Salt Slow about 2 years ago. And now we have one complete perfect Gothic novel from her. Our Wives Under the Sea is a dual narrative novel told from the perspective of a married lesbian couple in the UK. It never explicitly says where they live, but they live relatively close to the sea because one of them is a marine biologist. Our two protagonists are Miri and Leah. Deciding which one is kind of the protagonist of the two is difficult, but I guess you would argue it's Miri. The way that the dual narrative works is that Miri is kind of our main perspective character. Right now, in the present day, she's dealing with the fact that her wife, Leah, has returned from an expedition to the bottom of the ocean in a submarine and has come back wrong. She's been back now for about 3 weeks, and her behaviour is erratic. She is not communicating properly, and she's doing a lot of really weird things. The expedition that Leah went on was supposed to last about 3 weeks, and in the submarine was Leah and 2 other people. But they were down there for 6 months with no contact, and eventually managed to get back. And now Leah is doing things like running the bath in the middle of the night, filling it right up and then dunking her head in. She's obsessed with water, she won't stay away from it. And when she first came back, she was bleeding. Bleeding from her gums, bleeding from the pores in her skin. Every morning around 6:30, she would start to bleed. And Miri got so used to this that she would have tissues ready at 6 a.m, ready for her wife to come out of the bedroom because they're right now sleeping apart, and grab these tissues and kind of bung up her holes. It's horrendous. This gothic, dark horror imagery is very intense. But it's also Leah's behaviour. She's not speaking properly. She's not communicating very well. Occasionally when she does talk, she kind of just spews out facts and information like a Wikipedia page. The other narrative is from Leah's perspective, and it's what happened when she was down there. Bit by bit, we get information about what she saw, what happened, what went wrong, and her relationship to her 2 crewmates while they're in their submarine. The chapters circulate. You get Miri, Leah, Miri, Leah, Miri, Leah, all the way through. But Leah's chapters are much shorter. That's why I've called Miri our perspective character, because we get more time with her. And then Leah's chapters serve to kind of fill in the blanks of what happened. From Miri's perspective, we're learning about Miri herself. She occasionally talks about how the two of them met and the things that she misses about Leah when she was normal. And we also learn about Leah's personality, Miri's personality, Miri's relationship to her mother when her mother was alive, and the fact that Miri is a massive hypochondriac. Leah's chapters serve to show her perspective on Miri and the way that she misses her a little bit, and they serve to kind of plug up the mystery, although the mystery itself kind of remains. What exactly happened down there? What did it do to Leah and why? I was eager right from the beginning to learn what happened, but as you go on, you realize that's not really the point. This is a gothic novel in the sense that it has claustrophobia, it has very dark and horror-inspired imagery, it's very Lovecraftian, it's got, the mysteries of the deep and what is down there, the things we don't understand, the unknowable, dark, impossible depths of the ocean, it's all very Lovecraftian. But it's also a love story. This is a romance. This is the story of a relationship from all angles and all perspectives. You learn a lot about Miri and Leah's early days together, the things that they liked to do together, especially when they first started dating. They both love coming home from work and just watching films, a lot of classic blockbusters, classic horror films. They have a strong relationship to Jaws, for example. And we also learn about the quirks of their relationship and the way that the two of them were friends with other people and the things that they got up to together. There's a lovely story about a wedding, and a lot of it is very relatable. It just feels like a 21st century romance or ordinary relationship between two people. And what makes that so important is that it heightens the sadness when you look at the state of Leah now and what Miri is seeing and dealing with. A lot of Gothic novels, especially ones that are particularly horror-inspired or lean into the horror genre, they often focus on that horror element. What is frightening, what is happening, what has gone wrong. But this is a novel that really wants to focus on what came before, and therefore making the loss and the grief and the sorrow heightened. It's not just about what's happening now and how scary or sad it is, but how it's even more sad when you compare it to what happened before. So we really get to know these characters and their past. And this book really feels like it has two personalities. It flits between a traditional Gothic narrative and a modern budding romance turned relationship novel. And the two of these things are so cohesive, they work together splendidly, spectacularly. In terms of its themes, it's very much exploring grief and loss. From Miri's perspective, she has lost her wife. Leah is gone. The Leah that has returned is not the Leah that Miri has been missing. But Miri is such a fantastic and fascinating character. She is mildly unlikable. She is selfish. What really defines Miri as a character is her inability to care for herself and other people. We constantly get flashbacks to her relationship to her mother. Miri's mother died of a disease that killed her very slowly. The disease is never named, and at one point it very much points to it being Parkinson's, and then at another moment it really feels like it's Alzheimer's or dementia. It's not clear, and it doesn't need to be. But Miri herself is a hypochondriac, and that's also really important. When Miri's mother was dying, she lived in this cottage at the very edge of the sea on a cliff top or something, and it's got this lovely imagery surrounding it. But Miri was really bad at dealing with her mother's illness and her mother's death. She was kind of selfish and ignorant and naive about it all. She never allowed Leah to meet her mother. She just kept those two worlds completely separate because that was how she compartmentalized it. Now, what she's dealing with Leah, you can see the seeds of this growing right from the beginning, that what she's doing is kind of learning... Snowy! She's learning grief. She's learning how to cope and how to look after other people and learning to be less selfish. I really strongly relate to Miri. She's, as I said, kind of unlikable. And we're all unlikable. All of the time. We all have constant bad days and difficult moments, and we piss other people off constantly. No matter how close we are to people, probably because we're so close to people, we can really piss them off. And Miri really reflects that idea that you can constantly kind of fail the people around you or not be good enough for them or good enough to them. And I relate to this. I also relate to the fact that she's a hypochondriac. I'm a hypochondriac. I have dreadful health anxiety, and the pandemic is the thing that really kind of elevated that from bits of paranoia and nervousness here and there to just all-out health anxiety. And I really related to Miri. There are so many specific moments where her hypochondria kind of flares up, and I felt it. I felt the anxiety. I felt like I was breathing it in and relating to it so strongly. And I think her health anxiety is part of the reason that she's not very good at caring for other people, because health stuff, even mental health stuff, makes her nervous. And that means that she's kind of failing the people around her. She's failing Leah. Leah has come back broken. She's bleeding, she's doing weird things, and Miri doesn't handle it well. I kept wondering why Miri doesn't take her to the hospital. And then I thought, well, to be honest, the government will probably take her away and start experimenting on her or something. But there isn't really an explanation for why Miri doesn't take Leah to seek the help that she needs. And around the midpoint of the novel, when they finally do something, they go to kind of couples therapy. It's really not the thing that I expected, but it seems like the kind of thing that a broken, kind of pseudo-selfish person like Miri would do. Because she's not really worried about Leah all the time, she's worried about what she has lost. She's worried about the fact that she doesn't have her wife anymore. It's still coming from a kind of selfish place. And I love that. I think Miri is kind of a disaster character, but not in a big, explosive, self-destructive way. It's subtle, it's calmer, it's quieter self-destruction. It's something that you kind of have to really pay attention to. She's not openly dreadful like the characters in Wuthering Heights or a Melissa Broder novel. She is tenderly frustrating. And again, that's very human. I felt that. I relate to that. I know my faults and failings. I know my selfishness. I'm an only child. And I relate to Miri so much. I felt so much of my inadequacies in her. And again, to go back to what I said about this past and present and two perspectives thing, the fact that we get to see Leah the way she was before she came back wrong adds to that sense of loss, and that's how you come to pity Miri, because you see what a wonderful person Leah was. Leah was the good one of the two, if you like. She was smart, she was funny, she was inspired and creative, and she had a verve for life, and she loved her career. She was a person with fireworks in her eyes. And the fact that Miri has lost her makes it more tragic, but it's just as tragic the fact that Leah has kind of lost herself. Snowy. She's gone behind the cupboard. Okay, the cat has distracted me so bad I cannot remember what I was going to say, so I'm going to move on to something else. The language of this novel is absolutely beautiful, but it's not just poetic language. It's language that reinforces the personalities of its characters, and it reinforces their relationship and the little quiet moments. Julia Armfield in this book is very, very good at exploring very sweet and tender moments. And those sweet and tender moments, again, bring us back to loss and grief and the things that we are now losing out on. There's this recurring theme of, here's a beautiful thing that once happened, but because of where we are now, that thing is gone, that thing won't happen again, and it's just this constant reminder of loss and grief. But it's written in such a way that it's just spectacularly sad and moving. There are so many tiny, very specific tender moments where Miri laments the loss of a thing that Leah used to do, a habit that she had, a thing that was perhaps annoying, but Miri found it endearing, because that's how we are in relationships, that's how we are with our friends. There's a thing that, by all rights, should be really annoying or frustrating, but you find it sweet because you love them. And there are a lot of moments that are very specific to these characters, and it fleshes them out, and it brings them to life, and it makes it very literary. Despite this novel only being about 200 pages, Julia Armfield really takes the time to flesh out and dimensionalize these characters in a way that is hugely satisfying. And the language also reinforces the Gothic element, the fact that this is, at times, quite a frightening and unnerving novel. And the horror comes from Leah's moments in the submarine, and the things that they might see or might hear, and the things that might be out there in the deep, dark depths of the ocean. But it also comes from, as I said, these moments in their apartment where Leah has come back wrong, and is behaving really strangely and in a way that makes you uncomfortable. Blending the genres of Gothic fiction with a queer romance is spectacular. It kind of feels like the end point of Gothic fiction. Our Wives Under the Sea is where Gothic fiction was going to end up. It is the culmination of so much of the experiences and the themes and the motifs and the ideas and the character archetypes, everything that makes up Gothic fiction is all presented here in a thing that represents its end point. This is a lesbian romance. This is a queer drama. This is a Lovecraftian Gothic horror-inspired epic. This is everything that makes up the Gothic, smooshed together into a perfect parable of loss and grief and sorrow. There's so much to enjoy, and the fact that it's written in such an eloquent and charming and very, very easy to read way. There's nothing that's dense and heavy here in the writing. It's just a joy to read and explore. And I could keep talking, I could keep going. So far, this is my favourite book of the year. It was also one of the books I was most hyped for, and I'm so glad to learn that it is impeccable. Our Wives Under the Sea is a masterpiece of modern queer Gothic fiction, and I am so happy. Please read it. This is truly a must-read. Subscribe for books.